right, so we're going to get started with our final speaker before the morning. Her mentor is Josh, but unfortunately he is not able to be here today. He's under the weather. So I get the honor of introducing Ariel Patterson. Ariel was our, or is our Ha'ole Maloa scholar, which means that she came to the program with a proven track record of being dedicated to Aina. And I had the pleasure of reading her essays in the very first semester that she was here, with her responses to a quite amazing book. I recommend it to everybody. It's called Mapping Abundance. And it was heartfelt and enlightening, and she's a stellar example of how to be in community and for community. And I appreciate everything that she's brought to the program. And with that said, I will let her share her story.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for that introduction. Aloha mai kako. My name is Ariel Patterson, and mahalo everyone for being here today. This is my graduate school internship presentation, which is titled Keiki Aloha na mea Kanu, Protecting Native Plants from Extinction on Hawaiʻi Island. Keiki Aloha na mea Kanu is an olelo no eao, or Hawaiian proverb that means beloved children are the plants. And I just really felt that this olelo no eao encapsulated my experience here at TCBES. So I just want to preface by saying that all of the olelo Hawaiʻi used in this presentation has been learned from a variety of sources throughout my life, but I did look up the definitions on Ulukau Hawaiian dictionaries, just to ensure that I was using them properly. So I can't introduce myself without introducing my family. I'm the daughter of Michael and Laura Patterson, and the older sister of Amy and Sam, who are here today. And I'm very grateful to you all. You all have shaped me and have been my support system and my foundation throughout my entire life, but especially throughout this graduate school journey. I also cannot introduce myself without at some point talking about plants, because ever since I was a little kid, I've just been so drawn to them and in love with them. And they are my interest, my passion, and what I have pursued throughout graduate school. I was born in Anchorage, Alaska, and although I only spent a brief time there, I do feel my roots in this place because most of my extended family is from there. And I actually have 3 grandparents who are on Zoom today that are 2 live there and 1 was born there. I was raised from a young age on the east side of Hawaiʻi Island in the moku of Hilo, Puna, and Hamakua. And this is where I call home. After high school, I moved to Portland, Oregon, where I pursued an undergraduate degree from Reed College in environmental studies and biology. But after graduating, I moved back home and began delving into conservation and land restoration, because I had a strong desire to give back to the land that raised me, and I felt that this was the way that I could do so. I also want to acknowledge that all of these places, Alaska, Oregon, and Hawaiʻi, are indigenous lands. Dena'ina in Anchorage, Alaska, many different First Nations tribes in Portland, Oregon, and Kanaka Maoli in Hawaiʻi. Hawaiʻi in particular is currently illegally occupied by the United States, and Kanaka Maoli are the original stewards of this land, and I and many others believe that returning land to them and restoring Kanaka lifeways is the first step to healing it. So today, I live in the Ahupua'a of Kona, Hawaii, in the moku of Hilo. My mauna is Mauna Kea, my vai is Wailuku, and my kai are Waiuli and Lehia. And this Aina has nourished me throughout my life, and I'm just so grateful to be a part of this place. I also need to shout out all of my kumu throughout the years. There have been so many and too many to list here, but these are some of the most foundational people that have got me to where I am today and have broadened my perspectives, taught me things. And I just need to acknowledge them. So Josh VanDeMark is right there. He's the Hawai'i Island Plant Extinction Prevention Program Coordinator. And he has been my mentor over the past year and has introduced me to the rarest plants, native plants here in Hawai'i, and has taught me so much about how to care for them, both just through his knowledge. He has such a wide expanse of knowledge about these rare species, but also just through the dedication that he has to his work. Lopaka Dela Cruz was my supervisor prior to coming to UH, and he taught me about how to sustain ourselves from the land. Zach Judd was my mentor at my kupu internship with West Hawai'i NARS, and he was like my helped me be introduced to conservation for the first time. This was like the first time that I had come to these ecosystems, and he just taught me all the plants and how to manage all the areas, and yeah, it was super influential. Aaron Ramirez, right there, was my advisor in undergrad, and he taught me mostly just so many things, but also how to channel my passions into my work. Don Lowe was my mentor and friend while I worked at Wisdom of the Elders in Portland from 2016 to 2020, and she taught me so much about ethnobotany, indigenous ways of knowing, and nonprofit organizations. So all of these foundational people and places shaped me and helped me to develop my passions. My passions began with a love for the land and the people in my community. This love in action helps me to feel connected and gives me hope for our future, and is just what drives me through life. I have a deep love for the ecosystems on my home island and all the critters that compose them. And I'm most curious about the relationships between these organisms, how they interact with each other, and how we interact with them. I'm also fascinated about how the elements flow through us all and connecting us inextricably to each other. Through my study of biology and through observing my environment, I've seen many different kinds of relationships, as we all have. There are parasitic relationships, where the life force of one is sucked out to sustain another. There are also nurturing relationships, where life is tended to for mutual benefit, usually referred to as symbiosis. So my overarching goal in life and in grad school is to foster symbiotic, reciprocal relationships between humans and the environment that hold so much magic, culture, and value, and who we could not live without. My kumu and my family and the places that I've been raised in have helped me to develop these values and have taught me how to try to dedicate my life to upholding them. So before going into grad school, I had some ideas about what I wanted to get out of it. Because I've always loved plants and wanted to dedicate myself to cultivating health and ecosystems, I wanted my internship to be in native plant restoration. I wanted to learn as much as I could about how to restore our native plants, and then also to gain the field experience in doing so. Another thing that I wanted to get out of it was to cultivate my community and strengthen my pilina, or my relationships, with my kaiaulu, or my community, and aina, as well as explore my passions with special attention to the connections between them. And so I did my graduate school internship with the Plant Extinction Prevention Program here on Hawai'i Island, also known as PEPP, under the mentorship of Josh VanDeMark, who is the Hawai'i Island PEPP coordinator. PEPP is in close relationship with NARS, which is the Natural Area Reserve System, under the Department of Land and Natural Resources. So PEPP's goal is to restore native plant biodiversity by working on the front lines of extinction. And since PEPP was established in 2003, 30 plant species have disappeared from the wild just in the past 20 years due to habitat loss, invasive species, loss of pollinators or seed dispersers. But because PEPP has been there, these species have been saved from complete extinction, and they have hope to be restored again in the future. The whole Hawai'i Hai'aina, or the Hawaiian archipelago, has been experiencing a terrible extinction crisis of native flora and fauna for many years. Much of this due to the introduction of invasive species such as feral cattle, goats, sheep, pigs, rats, cats, so many. These invasive animals drastically alter our ecosystems that had not been adapted to resist them. And they threaten native plant species here in Hawaii. Historical records have documented the extinction of over 100 native Hawaiian plant taxa throughout the years. This photo right here is Cyanea pohaku, also known as haha. And it's endemic to Haleakala on Maui. It was endemic to Haleakala on Maui. It went extinct very shortly after this photo was taken in 1913. And it was most likely due to cattle trampling and grazing. Because of the many pressures that threaten native ecosystems in Hawaii, there are currently 223 Hawaiian plant species that have fewer than 50 individuals remaining in the wild. These species are the focus of PEPP's efforts and resources, and they're called PEPP species. Hawai'i Island has 43 of these PEPP species, and I worked with many of them throughout my internship. These numbers actually just decreased a lot from last year. I just checked the PEPP list yesterday, and they had gone down. I think it was 58 PEPP species on Hawai'i Island last year, and this is due, sadly, some to extinction, but mainly due to the rediscovery of a lot larger populations. So, which is good news. I mean, it's like mixed, but mostly good news. So PEPP has a set of approaches that they constantly engage in to fight the tides of extinction. And this includes surveying for wild plants, plant protection, propagule collection, sending these propagules to greenhouses and seed banks to be grown up or stored, outplanting, and then monitoring populations. So the PEPP approach aims to conserve and restore the most threatened native plant populations so that they're able to persist into the future. And at first, these plants need a lot of help, like they're on the verge, they're about to go out. But the goal is eventually to restore them to a point where they will be able to regenerate naturally once again and establish healthy populations. So in order to eventually reach this goal, PEPP focuses on preserving the genetic diversity of these rare species so that they're able to adapt to a changing environment and climate like they always have. So as my mentor, Josh, once said, plants don't confine themselves to political boundaries. And so they're found all over the island, meaning that we work with a lot of different organizations across the island, in a lot of different land management, with a lot of different land management agencies. However, we do frequent the natural area reserves the most often because this is our close relationship that we have. So these are some of the places that I worked in this summer, and I formed the strongest keeping the two just through working there consistently. So the Pu'o'umi Nar on the slopes of Kohala, Mapahoehoe Nar on the slopes of Mauna Kea, Waipahoehoe Gulch near the summit of Mauna Kea, Pu'umaka'ala Nar on the slopes of Mauna Loa, and Pu'uhawao Forest and Sanctuary on the slopes of Pololai. And I was super honored to be able to work on all of these different mauna throughout this internship. And it taught me a lot about how each plant species and even just individual plants that grow on that mountain are shaped by the mountain that it grows upon. So before I get into the work that I did with PEPP, I do want to define some terms that I'll be using throughout the next few sections because they're really important to managing rare species, and I didn't really know much about them before I started with PEPP. So founders are the plants that are remaining in the wild. These are the species where there are fewer than 50 left. And they were not planted by people, they were just growing there naturally. Outplants, on the other hand, are the plants that were planted by people. These outplants were propagated in greenhouses using propagules that were collected from the founder plants. So propagules can be a fruit, a seed, or a cutting. And we usually only collect propagules from founder plants unless a species has no founders left. And for all of these, we keep track of the maternal lineage of each propagule and outplant. And the maternal lineage is basically just a record of who that mama plant is, who the founder is that outplant came from or that propagule came from. And this information helps us to maximize the genetic diversity of populations that we're restoring, because each founder holds its own set of unique genetics. And the more founder representation there is in the seed bank, the greenhouse, or the outplant populations, the more overall genetic diversity there is, providing the species a better shot at persisting on its own. So surveying for new wild plants is one of our most important jobs at PEPP. We survey so that we're aware of how a plant species is doing in the wild, so that we know how best to manage it. And we survey for plants in areas where there are either records of them occurring historically, or there have been recent possible sightings, so we go out to positively identify them. And finding new wild plants of a rare species is super exciting, because when a plant species has fewer than 50 individuals remaining in the wild, just finding one makes a huge difference. This means that we have a new founder with a whole new set of genetics to collect propagules from. And this eventually provides greater genetic diversity to our outplant populations, and means that the species just has a better chance of making it overall. So these photos are from a day that we went surveying up in Kohala. We were looking for a rare native grass called Greenacloa expansa, which is pictured above. And this was a plant that Josh had potentially spotted years before when he was just on a different mission. They had like briefly landed in this fog, and he thought he spotted it just because he had seen an illustration of the plant prior. He never actually seen the plant in person. So we came back on this day, and we ended up finding and positively identifying 22 Greenacloa expansa plants. They're super exciting. So we took a couple of snatchlings back with us to give to the greenhouse staff so they could grow them, and then they could collect seeds from them, and then eventually outplant them again. So this was a super fun and exciting day, despite the 5-mile hike out in the boot swallowing mud. Another huge job that we do at PEPP is protecting our plants. So the reason that these plants are so rare in the first place is because they face an onslaught of threats, from trampling and grazing by ungulates to predation by rats and slugs. Some of the ways that we protect our rare plants is by weeding them when they're getting overtaken by invasives, placing protective bags around the fruits to prevent predation, spreading slug repellent or insecticides, or setting rat traps to protect the seeds from being eaten. Because for some reason, rats, slugs, insects all seem to love eating rare plant fruits. And this means that it's really hard for them to regenerate on their own. So without these protective measures, seeds are often lost. We also spend a lot of time working with our partner crews like NARS to build fences around entire units to exclude ungulates like cows, sheep, goats, and pigs, so that these ecosystems can have a chance to recover. If building an entire unit is not possible at that time, then we build individual exclosures around each outplant or founder. Because when left unfenced, we lose entire populations of endangered native plant species really quickly. When fenced, however, the native species do bounce back. Phyllosia argutidentata, which is pictured up here in the outplant tray, was thought to be extinct in the wild until a plant was rediscovered in a fenced ungulate-free unit by Callie Barnes with the Three Mountain Alliance. So what had probably happened was that the plant had been grazed down by the cattle that were in the area, and once the area was fenced, it was allowed to regrow, and then it was able to be rediscovered. So since it was rediscovered, PEPP has partnered with the Three Mountain Alliance and Kamehameha Schools to collect seeds, grow outplants, and reestablish historical populations across the island, which is a great success story for PEPP. Another important thing that we do is collecting propagules. So it's extremely important because of the predation that I mentioned earlier that a lot of these fruits experience. And so it's a huge part of what we do, but it does require really good record keeping of these plants because they are in such remote places that take a lot of time and resources and effort to get to. So we keep record of their phenologies of each plant, such as when they fruit, when they flower, when they seed. We keep records of their location and their identity so that we know when to go out, where to go, and which plants to collect from in order to have the greatest genetic diversity represented in the seed banks and greenhouses, and eventually in our outplanted populations. So the metadata that we record on the collection bags are the 6-letter plant code, which is the first 3 letters of the genus and the first 2 letters of the species. The identification number of the founder plant, the location, the date, and the collector initials. So like I said previously, one more thing. Like I said previously, we usually only collect from founders unless there are no remaining founders left in the wild, then we collect from outplants that represent a known maternal lineage. Because there is some risk in collecting propagules from outplants at random without knowing what that maternal lineage is. Because when we accidentally flood a population with plants that are too genetically similar to each other, it makes the population less resilient and adaptive. So this is a big part of our strategy at PEPP, is just making sure that the genetic diversity is maximized. Once we do gather the propagules, we send them to either a greenhouse, which is the volcano rare plant facility here on Hawai'i Island, or we send the fruits or seeds to the Land Arboretum Seed Conservation Lab on Oahu, where the greenhouse or seed bank staff clean and store the seeds and root the cuttings. And then once there's a safe place to plant the outplants, then they grow them up and send them to us to plant. So in my opinion, outplanting is one of the most fun parts of the job because to me it feels like gardening in the ecosystem, like the whole island is your garden. We outplant with utmost care because we want our outplants to have the best chance of survival, not only because so much work goes into collecting seeds and growing the plants, but also because these plants are precious and they contain genes that are at risk of going extinct. We're very careful about keeping track of the maternal lineages of our plants so that we can outplant in ways that maximize founder representation in the outplanted populations. This requires tagging each individual plant with information about its maternal lineage. It's important for us to make sure that as many maternal lineages are represented in the outplanted populations as possible, because this genetic diversity makes them more resilient and allows them to continue to adapt to their changing environment. I keep repeating this because it's so important. Finally, monitoring PEPP species populations is another super important thing we do to determine if the management efforts that we're doing are working. And then this way we can adapt our strategies to ensure that we're successful in strengthening the population. So during my internship, we worked with a couple of monitoring projects with both species of ahinahina or silver sword that are endemic to Hawai'i Island. So these are the Mauna Loa ahinahina, which grow in bogs, which is Argyroxyphium kauensi, and Mauna Kea ahinahina, which is Argyroxyphium samosensi. So we monitored and retagged all of the population, all of the outplants for the Mauna Loa ahinahina population in the in a Pu'umaka all-in-R to check on their survival rates, their blooming rates, and their natural regeneration rates. We discovered a ton of tiny little baby ahinahina sprouts in the bog that grew naturally after one of the outplants went to seed. We also learned which maternal lineages were present in the population, which is going to inform future outplanting efforts to introduce new maternal lineages into the population. We also outplanted missing maternal lineages in the Waipahoehoe unit on Mauna Kea, shown in the middle, doubling the amount of founder representation here. We were able to do this because of previous monitoring efforts that told us which maternal lineages were absent and thus which founders to go collect seeds from grow into out plants, and then plant into this population. So through this work, we are able to essentially double the amount of genetic diversity in this population, which just gives them so much better chance of making it and allows them to continue the adaptive processes that allowed Ahinahina and its relatives to evolve into such a unique, beautiful, and diverse plant lineage in the first place. So because although I worked with many PEPP species throughout my internship, I did get to work with Ahinahina the most extensively. I learned so much about threatened plant conservation through Ahinahina, and I was honored to witness her and get to know her at all stages of life, from sowing her achenes, which are her seeds, smelling her honey-like blooms, finding new baby sprouts in an Ahinahina bog recently gone to seed, and watching cloudwater collect on her silvery sword-like leaves. I was able to visit some of the few remaining wild Mauna Kea Ahinahina near the summit of Mauna Kea, and I can picture what this ecosystem used to look like. So before the introduction of ungulates, Ahinahina used to be the dominant plant species at this elevation. At the highest elevation where plants were present was dominated by Ahinahina, which is amazing to me, to imagine what that used to look like. They also helped the mountains soak up water from the clouds, and they hosted a whole community of insects and microbes and other life. So I was honored to work with and learn from Rob Robichaud, who was one of the leading experts of Ahinahina conservation, who is one of the leading experts of Ahinahina conservation and research in Hawaii. And Rob has seen Ahinahina populations grow significantly through conservation work like this over the span of his career, which just gives me hope for that these will someday become dominant once again. So working with PEPP taught me a lot about field work and how difficult it can be to get to the remote places that the threatened species live in, because they live in like the most remote places on this island. And so it almost always requires hiking through inclement weather conditions and rough trails, or traveling for miles off-road in four-wheel drive vehicles, or even traveling in helicopters. Also just like chainsawing away at giant trees that are in the road, like you see up here. And it's really hard work to care for our precious native plants, and I have a lot of respect for people like Josh and my coworkers at PEPP who dedicate their lives to this kind of work. Despite all the hard work, everything is worth it for the pilina built with place across Mokuokeawe and their ecosystems of plants, birds, insects, snails, microbes, and swirling elemental forms. Pilina built through learning how to care for these places. Pilina built through getting my hands dirty and my boots soaked to fulfill my role as a symbiotic part of the ecosystem, allowing myself to become a part of these places and also allowing them to become a part of me. So through my internship with PEPP, I was able to cultivate Pilina with place, with non-human friends, and with my mentors and coworkers. But another goal of my graduate school journey was to cultivate Pilina with my kaiaulu, or my community more broadly. And throughout grad school, I was able to do this by, in many different ways. With my community in TCBES, in Hilo, across Hawaiʻi and across the Pacific. But this is an ongoing process that I hope to keep up this momentum throughout the rest of my life, because it's so rewarding and fulfilling. And I really feel that connecting with people over a shared love for place is so incredibly important to me, and is what inspires me and instills me with hope. So one of the ways that I intentionally cultivated community throughout grad school was by participating in and then later coordinating Malama Aina workdays with organizations across the island. And these have been so meaningful and fun, and have built Pilina on many levels, with the organizations and the people within them, with places and the land where these workdays took place, and with everyone participating in the workday. Nothing bonds people together like working side by side with our hands in the dirt or in the local io. I participated in Malama Aina workdays with organizations like Hui Malama Ikeala Uwili, Hawaii Wildlife Fund, and Three Mountain Alliance. As the Kaneola Club Community Relations Coordinator, this past year, I organized a couple of work days with Kumuola Marine Science Education Center and Kohala Watershed Partnership. And these experiences were some of the most fun and rewarding of my graduate school journey. Finally, being a part of the Women in STEM conferences of 2024 and 2025 has been so fulfilling and has been my way of taking on more of a responsibility of being an active part of my community. So the 2024 conference was incredible, and I learned so much from the lead organizers about how to run a conference, and then also learned so much from all of the panelists and keynote speakers, just about overshared experiences of being a woman in STEM. I took on much more of a leadership role in the organization of the 2025 Women in STEM conference, which just happened at the end of February. And it was such an amazing experience and was incredibly challenging, but also very heart-filling. And it made me feel so grateful for everyone in my community. And it made me feel that the possibilities are truly boundless when we come together with intention. Another way that I was fortunate enough to expand the reaches of my community connections was through attending conferences and educational festivals, courtesy of Ha'ole Maoloa Foundation, which funded graduate school for me. I was able to attend the Nahele Hele Dry Forest Symposium in Kona, the Entomological and Botanical Meeting in Honolulu, the New Zealand Conference of the Birds in Aotearoa, and the Bishop Museum Kahului Festival, also in Honolulu. And these experiences taught me about the subjects. I built connections with the people around shared passions, and it just strengthened my links to places outside of Hilo where people are doing amazing work. And traveling to these conferences helped me to better understand how to pursue my passions, live more authentically, and how to aloha my home. Keiki aloha namea Kanu, beloved children are the plants. During my PEPP internship, I always pictured us as like gardeners of the forest, attending to our rare native species with utmost care and loving them as if they were plants in our garden or even our own children. For me, this metaphor extends to tending to my network of relations with Aina and community. I strive to tend to all my relations with love and care, like a gardener or a farmer cares for their plants. So I just want to mahalo everyone who has got me to where I am today and who has believed in me and my support system. So mahalo to Josh VanDeMark, my mentor, and the PEPP crew, who taught me so much. And mahalo to all my kumu at UH, especially Lisa Canali, for your guidance and knowledge. Mahalo to Ha'ole Maoloa Foundation for the financial support. Mahalo to my cohort for being so fun and amazing. Mahalo to my family and friends for supporting me. Mahalo to my community and to Aina for always being there to turn to. And mahalo to all of you for being here today. Yes, Nathan.
I just want to say how much of an incredible talk this was. Great job, by the way.
Thank you.
So I mean, I think we can all tell that your favorite PEPP species was a Hilo. Am I correct on that assumption?
Yes.
Okay, which I mean, honestly, it's my number 2 favorite. But what? Do you have like a least favorite PEPP species? There you're like, oh, you're working with this. I was just genuinely curious.
No,
It's not a mess.
they're all good. Thank you for the question, though. Thank you. Kupono?
Like Ariel, thanks so much for sharing everything you've done with such a special project. Obviously you've always had to deep connection with species and plants. How have your perspectives kind of evolved or just been added to, I guess, after doing this project?
That's a really good question. That's a really big question.
Yeah, no, like just like one thing.
Let's see. I think just like seeing how some of these plants are so like they need so much support right now because they're so close to going out, and I didn't really realize that like they're like basically need like life support. But it also just made me value them so much because every single one is so unique and amazing and holds so much history. And yeah, I think I guess it was just like more experience, like interacting with these species. 'Cause I never had really done that before. Yeah. Thank you. River.
Amazing. My question was you're just like, everyone mentioned, like your passion is really evident in your presentation and the wonderful things you shared. What is your opinion on the best way to try to cultivate some of those feelings in somebody who might not have grown up with that connection, or who might be maybe unfamiliar with how to become closer with places that they want to connect?
That's an amazing question, River. I honestly would say, like, being around people who have that passion, that's what instilled the passion in me, was like being around people that have that passion. So, like, joining work days, where you're being taught about the place and about what you're doing, and then also everyone else who's at that work day is like super passionate as well. And you mostly just learn from the people that you surround yourself with. So yeah, I would say just get involved in work days if you can. And yeah, you can learn like from books and the internet, but then also like just talking to people. And by learning more, then I feel like you become more, that sparks the passion. But that's a really good question. I feel like I don't have a great answer.
That was a great answer.
Lisa?
Well, I was hoping maybe you could share a little bit about that other part of you with the children and your the early childhood. You share a little bit about that passion.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's kind of a passion that I have not really like delved that much into, but I am really interested in like education and yeah, I'm taking an early childhood development course, which I'm going to once I graduate, and have time, but yeah, hopefully I will be able to use that to just like teach the children and people about how special these places and plants are, because that's where it all starts.
Chloe, how's it look on the chat? Okay. All right, Zoom audience, you're being really quiet. Feel free to ask any questions. We do have time for one more question. All right.
Rylan.
That was wonderful, thank you. Can you share a story that you learned that you didn't know before about one of the plants that you were working with?
Yeah, let's see. There's so many, it's hard to think of some, but I learned so much about Ahina Hina working with Rob. And I actually interviewed him for another project, which was a podcast with Lisa's class. And I learned about the story of like how Ahina Hina got here. So like a lot of the native plants here got here from other Pacific islands, and that's why like so many of our native species are similar and like closely related. But Ahina Hina got here from like California. And so it looks a lot like the tarweeds over there because that's their common ancestor, or that's what it's closely related to. But I learned this crazy like theory of the seed that came to Hawaii was a like mutation, like a polyploid mutation. So it's not like a typical tarweed. It was like a mutated seed that came over here, and that's why it's been able to like explode in diversity, because it's like really readily adaptable. It's just like amazing that one little occurrence happened, and then, or like maybe a couple different little occurrences happen. It's not like fully known, but and then just like expanded into all of this diversity that we see. So I don't know, that's a little story.
All right. Well, let's give a little bit more.